All right, welcome back to New Orleans Super Bowl Radio Row, talking ball with Pat Leonard on the Believe Network. Brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, Salaretta for men, menswear, luxury menswear and tailoring, Estate 98 Coffee, and my bookie sportsbook. Special guest today, Alex Beglinger. He is an NFL agent at Disruptive Sports, and in my mind, an expert on all things offensive line and a good friend. Alex, thanks so much for being here. Big Al, as they call him.
They do call me Big Al. I appreciate you, Pat. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no doubt. So I cover the NFL, but definitely in the Giants locker room every day. And the offensive line is a constant concern. It's a constant process of Joe Shane trying to reform it and strengthen it so that they can figure out how to protect their quarterback. My first question relates to Evan Neal. He's the right tackle. He's a player who some people feel like it would make more sense to move him into guard, give him a chance there because it hasn't worked out at tackle. Do you think that would be a good idea for the Giants to try out with Evan as like a last resort to see if that first round pick will work out? Or is moving from tackle to guard for a player like him at his size not advisable?
I mean, the big thing is you always want to be mindful, right? If you're spending the draft capital, you think he's good enough to play all five positions probably, but putting him inside the guard with his length, it's going to take an adjustment period. And that adjustment period is not as easy as everybody thinks, but I think can be done. I think this year, especially at the Super Bowl, we see Mekhi Becton, right?
Yeah.
Time left tackle tearing it up at guard, and he's, I would say, a little bit bigger than Evan. And probably not as long, but I mean, he's doing well. So I think you've seen other guys do it. I think it's always worth the shot because you got to build that kid's confidence back up, right? I think he's someone that has probably struggled because offensive line, I think we heard Will Campbell say it the best, like, if I give up 12 sacks, I'm working at Amazon, and so it's one of those things where if you're not playing well, it's very noticeable to everybody.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. What do you think of the Chiefs' solution moving Tooney out to tackle, especially in a game like this where they're going up against Jalen Carter on the interior? How do you think that plays out? Would you go that route if you were KC here?
I mean, that's a big gamble, right? I mean, can he do it? Sure. I mean, I think most offensive linemen are versatile enough. You're in the NFL for a reason. You're probably a big dancing bear, right? And you can play everything. And so it's one of those things that the coaches know better than I would, but if they feel like he can hold up out there on the edge and he can just be serviceable, I think it gives him a chance. Right now, Jalen Carter on the inside, that's a monster. I mean, that is a big man. So you got to be intentional with what you're going to do up front.
In Philadelphia, a lot of great players they've added, whether it's draft, free agency, a guy like Lane Johnson who's been there for 1,000 years. How big of a deal is Jeff Stoutland, though, as far as the impact he makes and the fact that the Eagles really pretty much year in and year out have the best offensive line or a top 3 offensive line in football?
I mean, it's consistency, right? I mean, that was one thing we had talked about before with the Giants. It's just how do you become consistent in that group? And it starts with coaching, it starts with players, and then it gets down to technique, right? If they're constantly getting the same technique, the same reps over and over and over again, offensive line is a position where you just need the reps. Right. And if you're a revolving door franchise that has guys coming and going very often, you're not going to be in that kind of top 3 offensive line, whereas the Eagles have had one person pretty consistently. And so you're getting coached the same. And so they know what to expect every year.
How crazy was it for you watching in the Eagles NFC Championship game where you had Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson, one with a back injury that he couldn't even play through and he wasn't in the lineup to start, and then the other guy on a knee, and they're essentially fighting each other for who's going to go into the game and fight through it. Like, as an O lineman, how difficult is it to play through something like that? I feel like once the guy's in the game, like, everybody takes it for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I would say most offensive linemen are going to play through an injury. Most guys are going to be tough guys, right? We're rub some dirt on it and throw a Band-Aid and let's roll kind of crew. And so if you don't have the mentality in the room, it's going to be hard to stick with the room, right? Because that's where the base of the culture is with toughness. It's an interesting point you brought up. I was doing a mock interview for a coaching client yesterday. Said, and we're gonna have the toughest offensive line. I said, great. How do you coach toughness? And I go, you're going into an interview, like, you want to be ready to answer that question. Like, how do you coach toughness? And you can't. In my opinion, I don't think you can coach toughness. So Landon Dickinson, Jurgens, those guys, they're tough guys at their core. They know what they signed up for. They believe in it, and so yeah, they're going to fight each other to go in the game.
That's fascinating you said that, because in New York, going back to the Giants for a second, one thing they were missing on their line this year, they had some talent, right? Like Runyon has played some good
They
football.
spent money in free agency.
Andrew Thomas, right? Even Van Roten gave them more than they were expecting, I think, even though he didn't have an excellent year. But they were missing dogs.
Yeah.
They didn't have, like, when they had Feliciano and even Nick Gates, like, these are guys who,
they're scrappy.
If you look at their PFF grades and you said rank them as the top centers, guards, whatever, but they're guys who will run people over. They play through the whistle. If their teammate receives a dirty hit, they're in the guy's face on the opposite team's sideline. And I think you're right. I don't think you can coach that. I think it's like an inherent quality.
Yeah.
So is really the only solution to add players who have it?
I think so. I think you got to go find, through your scouting, through your evaluation process, you got to find guys that kind of tick that box of like, is he a tough guy, right? One of the things I always heard is, would I want to walk down a dark alley with this guy?
I like that.
And that's the nastiness, right? If you can answer yes, then we're probably friends. If no, we're probably not. I'm gonna walk down a dark alley with you because I know you got my back and I got your back.
Right.
So that's kind of how offensive linemen roll. My girlfriend always loves to say, offensive linemen are a copy and paste of each other, just different fonts. So we're all kind of the same at the core, but we just kind of look different or built different.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that.
So you coached Braxton Jones of the Bears in college. What was that like? What is he like as a player and a person? And how have you seen him evolve in the NFL?
Braxton's a big kid that he was a developmental kid, right? At Southern Utah University, kind of overlooked, but he had traits. And I think that's what a lot of people should be evaluating, his traits. And he worked his tail off. I was there for about 11 months, a year with him. And that kid, from the time I got there to the time I left, he was a guy that was just a grinder. Like, he was always doing extra. He was the first one in the room, the last one to leave. Like, all the cliche things we hear, but it was like, that's just how he lived his life. Like, even when he goes to the grocery store, if he says, I'm going to the grocery store at 11:30, he was there at 11, right? Like, he's just one of those punctual people. And to see him with the Bears, I know Chicago fans like to, get on him because it's one of those things. When you're playing well, nobody cares. When you're playing bad, they want to say something. And so, unfortunately, he got hurt this year. So I'm praying and hoping he has a speedy recovery, because I think he has the ability to stabilize and stabilize that offensive line there. He's a good piece for them.
So I know we're still a little bit away from the draft. We haven't even played the Super Bowl yet. But in New York, again, it's like the constant, how can we fix this now? Like, you go back a few years ago, and the Evan Neal, Josh Azudu, Marcus McKeithen class of Joe Shane's first draft, none of it hit. And so that's kind of, they're still in that process of what do we find. Are there any players in the draft this year on the offensive line that stand out to you? Guys that either you saw down at the Senior Bowl, could be clients you're working with, could be somebody you saw in the fall and just love their tape. Because where the Giants are picking at 3, to be honest, quarterback, I would love them to pick an offensive lineman again. Like, you need to get tough on the line of scrimmage. So anyway, long-winded way of asking, what young draft prospects look promising to you?
Oh, I love talking offensive line draft. So
yes, you do.
This could be a long-winded question.
Let's go.
Obviously, the big ones stand out, right? Calvin Banks, Josh Connerly, early from Minnesota. Connerly is obviously a kid that I've spent some time with when he was in high school, actually.
Interesting.
I lived up in Seattle, and I did some offensive line training up there. And so I got to see him before he was a first-round prospect. And he's been the same kid, the consistency, but he has that toughness element to him. I've kind of seen it, he kind of bucked up on me one day, and I'm like, hey, man, like, you're in high school, though. Like, I don't know you,
wow.
know? And so it's just one of those things that now it's kind of cool to see him. I went to see him at the Senior Bowl, and he was out there kicking butt. And it was really exciting to see. The one, I always give you a sleeper deep draft dive, which I don't think he's a hidden secret anymore, but Jackson Slater from Sacramento State. Jackson Slater, again, he's from that Seattle area. He's friends with Josh Connerly. I saw them training growing up in high school, early years of college. He's a kid that I've had a relationship with. I tried to sign him as an agent, but, sometimes it doesn't go your way.
Yeah.
But he's a kid that I love his game because he's developed so much. He's a guy, small high school kid that went to Sac State. I mean, most people wouldn't even know where Sacramento is,
right?
The capital of my home state, California. But so I know. So I've been able to watch him for the last couple of years. He's a kid like Ashton Genty, who is a client of mine that didn't hit the portal. I mean, that kid could have got a lot of money in the portal. Said, hey, listen, I want to build my legacy at Sac State, and just grinded it out. He went down to the Senior Bowl and was kicking people's butt. And so, like, people, that was the big thing for Jackson. Like, how's he going to hold up against these SEC guys? Jackson went and put everybody on notice.
Wow.
So that's a guy, we go back to our toughness conversation, right? That he injects toughness in your room right now because he's not taking any BS from anybody. We're rolling down the dark alley. I'm taking Jackson Slater with me.
Love it. Love it. So you mentioned Ashton Genty, the star running back from Boise State. Saquon Barkley obviously has taken the league by storm this year with the Philadelphia Eagles. What about Ashton, as you've gotten to know him, do you think will translate immediately to being like that Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson type for an offense?
Well, the thing about Ashton, I think most people in the nation don't know, is Dirk Cutter, the offensive coordinator at Boise State, has been a previous NFL head coach. So offensively, game plan-wise, verbiage, technique, how they teach it is all NFL-like. So he's stepping in a building ready to go. And, he also just rushed for 2,600 yards. You know what I mean? So,
right.
and people love to say, well, competition. Yeah, but he didn't have the greatest offensive line. So if you're picking up at the top of the draft where we think he's going to go, they might not have the best offensive line. So he kind of makes nothing out of something. And 2,600 yards later and, Heisman runner-up, I think he'll be all right.
I mean, I guess it's probably too early to ask you this, but you see any good fits for him? Be a good fit anywhere, but you see any good fits for him around the league, or
I mean,
too early?
It's a little early, but obviously the big one is the Dallas Cowboys, right? The Giants would have a twice a year meeting with Ashton, but
oh boy, they love Boise guys too.
Oh, they do, and they Ashton's from Dallas area, right?
Okay.
I would love to see him in New York. No, but I'd love to see him in New York, right? Like, I don't think the running game this year kind of turned out the way they thought because you lose Saquon. But thank you to Saquon and Derrick Henry for leaving their original draft teams and making running backs great again, And so it's just one of those things where, the fit is probably Dallas, but, I mean, he can go anywhere in ball.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, some quick sponsor segments. Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. It's Here Comes the Boom. So turning our attention to the Super Bowl, which non-obvious player is going to make the biggest boom impact in the Super Bowl on the Chiefs or Eagles? Basically somebody other than Saquon and the two quarterbacks.
I think it's going to come down to the Chiefs, second-level defenders, their linebackers, their safeties. Can they tackle Saquon? Because I think Saquon's going to get the ability to run the ball and run the ball well. And I think he'll be able to kind of break that first initial wave of Carter and all those guys. But can the linebackers and the safeties get him down one-on-one?
Wow. I can tell you that really depends on, having watched him for so long, that depends on the kind of speed he has going through that hole, right? If he dances past that first level, but he's not going full tilt, he might be being brought down. Yep. But if he's full speed on a straight line, he's out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw that in that NFC Championship.
Interesting.
I mean, the way they run the ball, man, it's fun to watch for an offensive line.
No doubt. All right. Look Good, Play Good, brought to you by Sal Loretta for Men. Luxury menswear and tailoring. They get me right at Super Bowl Radio Row every game day. Big Al, what client, let's say, is the best dressed or brings it every week, game day ready? Like when they're walking in, it could be a young man in college with some NIL money. It could be one of the NFL players.
From the Disruptive roster?
Yeah.
Easily Kendrick Bourne.
Oh.
Kendrick Bourne, man, his fits every week. Him and his wife do a great job getting his clothes ready to go. And if you check him out on Instagram, he's always kind of posting his fit. And so I'm going to go with Kendrick.
All right.
Ashton might be a close second.
Okay. Ashton's going to bring it? All right. That's good to hear. Yeah, I remember seeing Kendrick on Radio Row last year in Vegas, and he was bringing it then, too.
I think last year in Vegas, he was wearing his own merch.
Yeah, okay. That was his stuff?
That was his stuff he created. So,
wow.
And this year, he did a really big emphasis on suits on game day. So if you go back through the year, I mean, he was suited and booted for every game. So
beautiful. All right, and finally, Pat's Picks brought to you by MyBookie. Who's going to win the game, Chiefs or Eagles, and why?
The Eagles, because they're going to run the ball.
All right.
That's my simple answer.
Yeah, O-line and Saquon. That's going to win it. All right, he is Alex Beglinger. He is an NFL agent at Disruptive Sports. And this is Talking Ball with Pat Leonard on the Believe Network, brought to you by Boom Chaga, Salaretta, Estate 98 Coffee, and my bookie. Big Al, we got some free Boom Chaga for you.
Yeah.
Some anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants here.
I need that from this airplane ride.
Hell yeah. Put it in your coffee, put it in your tea, put it in your water. Thanks so much for
Thanks
being
so
here,
much,
man. Really
Pat.
appreciate you.
Absolutely, Pat. Thank you.